We're not talking about season 2 of Andor because it's great and you should watch it. And it's also just nice to enjoy something without making content about it. That's where that's going to end. But we are going to talk about the state and future of Star Wars given current goings-ons. I never know how to pluralize hyphenated phrases like that. But current events. A couple of things that we kind of need to establish for the context of what we're talking about. Kathleen Kennedy has been the head of Lucasfilm for the past decade and a bit. She has received a lot of the criticism of the Disney era's issues. Some of them I think are justified. Regardless, when you're the head of a company, you are the one that gets targeted for that. Now, on the creative side, since the end of the main Disney trilogy and the move into the streaming era, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have been the two lead creatives, as it were, behind Star Wars as a whole. Dave Filoni, widely known for being the big man behind the Clone Wars, and I have issues with him. I'm going to talk about that in this video. And Jon Favreau, of Iron Man fame, and just generally, I think overall, a good writer and director. I also have issues with him in Star Wars. But so the news that really led me to thinking about what we're going to talk in this video, but the news that led me to thinking about what we're going to be talking about is the fact that Kathleen Kennedy is retiring from Lucasfilm. By the end of this year, she will have moved on and someone else will be taking her place. And I know a lot of people are going to be happy about it. And my initial reaction was in line with that. The Disney era tyrant is leaving the throne. Great. But then I found out that Andor was largely greenlit because Kathleen Kennedy and Tony Gilroy are connected. They know each other and they get on well. Because apparently, Filoni was not terribly keen on it. But right, so I mentioned I have issues with Filoni even before this reveal on the House of R podcasts from The Ringer. Host Joanna Robinson mentioned that, yeah, Andor was very unlikely to get greenlit, but the fact that Kathleen Kennedy and Tony Gilroy know each other and get on well, and Kennedy has a lot of trust in him, is largely the reason that it got through, because apparently Filoni was not a fan. Now, even before this announcement, I have issues with Filoni. Particularly, I really like the first season of The Mandalorian. I like the first half of the second season. But then pretty much everything that Star Wars media has been after that has been a bit of a Clone Wars circle jerk. And we can very much blame Filoni for that. I thought I'd quickly inject a little tier list of my opinions on Star Wars media in the streaming era, because it's probably an interesting little bit of context for how my opinion has been formed. Note, I haven't finished watching Skeleton Crew, so I've not put it on this list, and this is just the live action stuff. Animated stuff, I don't think I've watched any of it. Yeah, no. Anyway, now don't get me wrong, I love the Clone Wars animated series. There is a reason that Star Wars fans widely regard it as some of the best Star Wars media out there, because it is great. Don't watch the movie. The movie's not good. But even the first season has a really good mix of, yeah, definitely like more kid-oriented stuff, and then stuff that is aimed at all the audiences that you can really appreciate. And I think the show kind of settles into aiming towards that older audience a couple seasons in. It is really good. And it takes the best part of the prequels, which is this really deep, complex political drama, and makes it actually interesting. Because I think in the movies, the prequels don't do a great job of showing that, but the Clone Wars make it really cool. That being said, Filoni is rather notorious for not wanting to let go of those characters. I think that Ahsoka's arc through Clone Wars is pretty complete. Now, I haven't watched all of Rebels. I watched the first 2 seasons and I was like, I hate this, I'm not gonna keep watching it, because it's definitely targeted at a younger audience than Clone Wars was. So I can't really comment on Ahsoka returning in Rebels and if that arc is good or not, because I haven't watched it. But I did watch all The Mandalorian, and bringing Ahsoka back is bad, and the Ahsoka show is also bad, and I think it does a disservice to most of the characters that they bring back from Rebels. Now, obviously, like I was saying, I haven't watched all of Rebels, so I'm basing my judgment off the first 2 seasons. I just don't think Ahsoka's very good, in the same way that Kenobi is not very good, and I need to check who we're going to credit for Kenobi being a shit show. I looked it up. We can't blame Filoni for Kenobi being bad. Ian McGregor and Kathleen Kennedy are both executive producers on it, and I think that's probably the closest we're gonna get to having really someone to point fingers at. I gotta check the Ahsoka series now as well. Okay, Ahsoka we can blame Filoni for, because created by Dave Filoni, showrunner Dave Filoni, written by Dave Filoni, and executive producer Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy. Filoni is very fixated on the characters that he really built out in the Clone Wars series, whether that's characters that he helped create or characters that were already existing that really got to be fleshed out, like Obi-Wan. He seems very fixated on that. That's why we get a lot of those callbacks to that stuff in The Mandalorian, and then why a lot of just Star Wars media in general has been around that. So, going back to Kennedy retiring, discussion leads us to believe that internally, like within Lucasfilm, the 2 top candidates are going to be your 2 top people there already, right? Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. I don't want either of them at the head of Lucasfilm, to be quite honest. Now, realistically, I think that it's probably not going to be either of them. It is going to be a corporate hire, another person that has more experience in an executive position, and I think that's going to be better than having either of those 2 running Lucasfilm. A, because I think they are better in creative positions. I can't really speak to Favreau in an executive position, but I think Filoni is better in a creative position than he is in an executive position, and I think his current situation where he has a lot of narrative control over Star Wars is the executive part messing with his creative goodness. But then there's also the fixation on the Clone Wars era that I think is going to be his downfall. So going back to what I was saying about, apparently, based on insider information, Andor would not have been greenlit if Kennedy hadn't pushed for it, does leave me worried about the future of Star Wars, because as much as I have issues with a lot of the stuff Kennedy has said about the management of Lucasfilm, I would also say that a majority of the best Star Wars media we have ever had has also been under her reign. That sounds so tyrannical, but you know what I mean. While she's been at Lucasfilm, we've had both the best and the worst Star Wars stuff. And it just leaves me to wonder, and I don't have an answer for this one, so if you have thoughts about this question in the comments, let me know, because I'd love to chat about it. It leaves me to wonder how much of the bad stuff is Kennedy's influence, and how much of it is the general movement on the market, the attitudes across the industry, which main channel video here talks about that, where there's just, there's a move for a lot of productions to approach things more like content and less like art. And I think Andor is a great exception to that, particularly when you're looking at the Disney catalog. Andor is genuinely, I would describe it as art. I can't really say that for most of the other Star Wars stuff. Even I went and watched Rogue One again after I finished season 2 of Andor, and I remember really enjoying Rogue One, and I still like it. I still think it's good. And I think in the context of Star Wars and just cinema at that time, where everything felt very Joss Whedon, Marvel quippy, Rogue One felt really refreshing. But then after watching Andor and then going back to watching Rogue One, it feels jarringly unserious. That's not to say that it doesn't take itself seriously, but there is a lot of the typical Disney complaints that I have are still in Rogue One, just less than compared to the Disney trilogy or Marvel stuff. But it does bother me that with Kennedy leaving, and she was a large reason that Andor got greenlit, with the failure of Acolyte, which I still think was unfairly reamed. I don't think it was great. I don't think the Acolyte was, groundbreaking, but I thought it was good. I thought it was like a solid 6.5 out of 10. But the fan servicey stuff is where the money's coming in, so I feel like that's probably gonna continue to be the focus, and that upsets me. Anyway, I think that's enough rambling for this video. That was just some thoughts I wanted to get out. Like I said, I didn't really want to do a video about Andor, just because I don't feel like I would need to really study it, and I've got enough other projects that maybe in a couple years I'll do a video about it. But I really, really enjoyed it. I've been recommending it to fucking everyone. If you like sci-fi stuff, political dramas or like crime dramas, Andor's great, go watch it. I've been saying to like a lot of my co-workers, it's like, you don't need to know shit about Star Wars to enjoy Andor. And then I've started watching Skeleton Crew. I haven't finished it, so I'm not gonna say anything. But so far it's all right. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like I said, go check out that main channel video that talks about why the industry kind of is moving towards content instead of art. The Acolyte does fall under some of that criticism there, but overall, fingers crossed for the future of Star Wars. Who knows, man?